our first class for speed optimization. Okay, so every website needs to be fast. So when we make a website, aside from our clients wanting it to be fast, we need to do it. So why do we need a fast website? Okay, so let's talk about it. Okay, so first of all, there's two main benefits of having a fast website. The first one is for conversions and user experience. So when you use your phone, when you use your computer as a consumer, as a visitor, you want the website to be fast. If it's slow, you'll just leave, or you'll not want to use it more, or you'll use it less, right? And if you use it less, you'll basically use the business less. So you'll buy less, you'll browse less, you'll see less ads, and then basically the business gets less benefit out of it. Okay, so number one is the user experience. People need to have a fast website to use it simply. The second reason is there's SEO benefits. So Google's, Yahoo, all the search engines, if you have a fast website, you'll get more rankings, you'll get more business. So there's two links that Google has provided that they say if you have a fast website, it'll be better for you. If you have a slow website, it'll be worse for you. And also, Google is releasing more and more tools to measure your website speed. And Google has also mentioned that in addition to speed, also one of their measurements will factor in the rankings in SEO. Okay, so the main things is have a fast website. People will use it more. People will buy more. And then the search engines will like you more. So very, very simple. Okay. So let's talk about a few things. So what is an actual fast website? How do you know what is a normal website? What is fast? How do you measure that? We divided them into three different categories: a very fast website, a good website, and a slow website. Okay, so what is a fast website? A very fast website loads in under 2 seconds. So if I go to my page, okay, let's just say Astral Web. Okay, so from the moment I click, how long did the whole page take to load? If it loads in under 2 seconds, that's good. If it loads between 2 and 5 seconds, it's considered also okay. So under 2 seconds, it's very fast. Under 5 or 6 seconds, it's good, and anything above 6 seconds, it's considered not good. Okay, we have sites that also load in 10 seconds or 15 seconds, right? So a lot of things. So if you notice here, in every website speed load, there's the time frame. So I divided that into the initial HTML and the rest of the assets. So what does that actually mean? Okay, so do you guys know, do you understand what that means? The first HTML and the rest? Anything? Make sense? I'm going to explain it. Okay, I want to make sure that it's clear. So when you load a page, let's say I load this page. This is the home page of AstroWeb website. Okay, so when I load the page, on this page, there's a lot of elements. So first of all, there's very simple, there's the HTML, right? So all of the page, all of the information that makes up how the page will look and function, right? So what's inside? You guys know this, right? All the HTML. In addition to the HTML, there's all the CSS, JavaScript, pictures, fonts. There's all these things. So each one of these, picture 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's all this information right here. There's a logo, there's icons here, there's scripts, there's Google Analytics, there's all these things that are loading. So on this page right here, there's 78 things that load on this page. Just to load the page, there's 78 things. So it takes time to load it. And the way the system works, okay, so a lot of you guys know this. This is a very basic example, but I want to explain on the left-hand side what you see, okay? So when I'm a customer and I go to the website as a browser and I type in astroweb.com and I hit enter, okay, what is actually happening in a simple way? I'm going to simplify this. What is actually happening? This is happening. So the browser is on the left-hand side, is requesting from the server some information and saying, okay, you know what? I want this page. For example, give me the home page. And then the server is saying, okay, here you go. Here's the HTML. So the first response is going to be, here you go. This page, I have it. And this is all the content. This is all the HTML. Once the HTML arrives to the browser is saying, oh, in this HTML, I have all these scripts and pictures. And it goes to the server and says, hey, give me all these pictures. Give me all this stuff. You guys know this stuff, right? Okay, and then what you have to do is you actually have to download all of the elements back and forth. So there'd be 75 different back and forths on the left-hand side. So it takes time. Once all the information comes, the browser will take all that information and it'll make it appear visually the way it's supposed to, right? This is how internet works. This is how browsers works. Give me the HTML, give me all the information, and then I'll put it and I'll make it look beautiful. That's what the browser's job is doing. It's just taking HTML, taking stuff, displaying it in the way that it should format. That's the job. Okay, so any question about this? Make sense? Una, make sense? Pretty simple, right? It's really simple. Okay, so so why do I mention this? Why do I mention this thing? Because when we look at a fast website, the whole website might load in 2 seconds or 7 seconds or 15 seconds, but we always split how long does it take to get the first HTML, and then how long does it take to get all of the rest and then display it visually. Actually, to display it on the page that looks like the final page. And it's important to notice that so you can understand when we diagnose the speed, we'll actually separate these two to figure out which part is slower, and we can optimize each part of those. Okay, so I'm going to explain some of these things. If you guys have any questions, just let me know, okay? So any particular thing, if it doesn't make sense, now is the time to ask. Okay, now a few small notes here. A website speed has to be calculated for every single page, right? So Astral Web has about 3,000 pages. Every page loads in a different speed. Homepage might be faster, slower. It might have more pictures. It might have less pictures. It might have videos. Every page has its own speed. So when you diagnose, you have to look at all the pages. Or the way we do it is usually we take the categories. Like, for example, for Magento, we take how fast is the home page, how fast is one of the category pages, how fast is the search page, product page, cart. So we always take the most basic pages. Okay, make sense, Ethan? Yes. Very simple, right? Okay. Okay, and then in addition, for more advanced things, is right now we talked about the page loads. I go to the contact page, it took 3 seconds to load. But what we do is we also monitor actions. So when I click on add to cart, how long does it take? When I sign in, how long does it take? It's not just loading a page, but it's actually doing more than that. So we have to check some of these other things. Okay, if I add one product to the cart or I add 20 to the cart, is it change the speed? Right, so we have to monitor actions as well. Okay, great. Okay, so this is an example about the page. So the total page could be, for example, it takes 8.6 seconds to load. And out of that, it loaded, for example, 30% of it is images, or right, 33% is a JavaScript, 27 images, etc. So a page is made out of many different things. Okay, so it's important to understand what is big, what takes time, and then how do we optimize that, okay? And so when you load a page, just like I did before, you can click on the inspect and look at all the elements that are loaded on the page. Okay, so now we're going to talk about actually making websites faster. So now we have a basic understanding. So how do we make things faster? Before we show how, we need to talk about what can we make faster. Okay, so what are the 3 main types? Number 1 is we can make our code more efficient, our code better. Working better, contacting the database in a better way, caching, doing all these other things. Second one is we can actually optimize our server and our software, okay? So if we have some additional software, they can run in memory. For example, Redis runs in memory, can go faster than writing to the disk, just for example, okay? And the last one is the CDN, having additional servers, additional content delivery networks that take the information from a closer standpoint and they deliver that. So our server works less and the CDN servers are closer to the customer, closer to the visitor. Okay, so these are the 3 categories. Okay, so the next part is talking about some tools that we can monitor. Before we optimize, we need to check what is the speed, how fast is it, what's going on. The first one is GTmetrix. Okay, you guys use this a lot. GTmetrix is a tool by another company, and what they do is you put in a URL and then you get the speed. You get the speed, the optimization, how long does it take to load, and many other things. Recently, you guys have been using GTmetrix for a long time. Let me show you an example here. Okay. Let me actually load. Okay, so I'm going to make a quick test. Okay, so recently GTmetrix changed a lot. And before it used to tell you how long your website loads and what does it do and do all these metrics. And what it's doing, let me show you right here. Okay, what it's doing is it changed to using Google's recommended web vitals. So even GTmetrix that checked the website speed, they're also changing to SEO benefits, to these kind of things. And I'll show you what that means. Okay, so it's scanning the website and it's giving us a score based on their own internal metrics. Okay, so the score, for example, is giving us a D, our performance, percentage, structure, and these things. So let me show you. So here it's showing you on the bottom this speed visualization. It's showing us how long it took to load the whole website. So it took a little over 4 seconds to load the whole page. And it took about half a second to start showing to the browser the first part of the page. So in addition to measuring the speed, there's also a measure on how long does it take to start showing information. So we call it perceived speed. So when a page if the page was all white here and only here it started loading, we would feel as a consumer that the website is very slow. But if you start loading the information earlier, you feel that it's kind of going faster. So the perceived speed is also very important. Okay, so let's talk about a few things. So one is how long does it take to load the whole thing? The second one is how long does it start to show? And then web vitals, right? So you have a few other things. So how long did it take to load the initial HTML? So about 0.8 seconds, which is pretty slow, right? And a few other things. So GTmetrix also gives you some recommendations, what you can fix, what you can do. So it's a tool that helps you monitor the speed and how to improve things. Okay, so this is the first tool. It shows you what the page was built out of. So you can see maybe I have too many images or maybe I have too many JavaScript, things like that. Okay. Second tool is you can use your own browser, Chrome extension browser. Just like I did before, I went to a page, I right-clicked on inspect, and then I went to the network, and I can check all of the elements here. How long does it take to load? Okay, so let's look at that. Let's load one more time. Okay, let me do that. So you can see how long does it load. This is called waterfall because it just shows you element by element, how does it load one by one by one by one, right? And you can see very clearly which ones take longer time, which ones are very big in size. You can monitor this, okay, etc. Okay, next thing we can do, and this is mostly for our APIs, we can use Postman. When we use Postman to check an API in action or some kind of thing like an add to cart or a connect to a system, there's always going to be in the system, there's going to be the result. And when we have the result, it'll tell you how long right here. It'll tell you how long it took to load. And then you can check that actions are actually how long it's taking, right? Okay. Next one is, this is not necessarily a tool, but I like to add it, is whenever we test, a lot of times we use the computer to mimic the mobile browsing, but sometimes it's just important to use your actual phone to feel how fast a website is. It's not as scientific, but the feeling is also important for how we measure our speed, right? Because most visitors, most of our clients, they use phones, right? We always use our computer to test, but it's not really a good way to do it. Using your phone is very important. Okay. Next one, what else can we use? This is one of the more important things for us, which is the Magento profiler. So we reviewed it last week, right, Michael? So when we want to optimize our code, most of what our code does is it affects the initial HTML, okay? When we optimize our information, our code, we're always going to be affecting this initial HTML, this initial one, because images and JavaScript and all that stuff is the other part. So when we optimize our code, we want to make sure this thing, can we get our first HTML to come in under 2.2 seconds or 0.07 seconds? How do we do that? We need to optimize our code. Magento is already a set product, so it's going to be very hard for us to optimize the code of Magento, and we probably don't want to do that. So what we always have to make sure is anything custom that we built is very fast. We're not calling too many times a database. We're not running too heavy of code. We need to optimize the HTML. So how do we do that? The easiest way to do it is run the Magento profiler. Okay, so do you guys know how to, have you ever used the Magento profiler?
Yes.
You've used it?
Yes.
No. No. Okay, so some of you have used it. What it does, it's very, very simple. Okay, I'm going to show you a picture of it. Okay, so this is not the best picture, but I'll show you the concept. Okay, so what you do is you go to the command line, the Magento command line, and you turn on the profiler. You basically say, hey, whatever, turn it on. Turn on the profiler. When you do that, every single page you visit on your dev site, at the bottom of the page, you're going to have a list. This will show you how a Magento built the HTML. So whenever someone goes to the homepage, for example, Magento will go and say, okay, do I have a cache? Do I have give me my session? Give me the element, give me the menu manager, give me the products, give me all that stuff. So it's showing you a list of everything that the PHP is doing on the server side to build that page. And the good thing about it, okay, I'm going to enlarge this a little bit more, is it tells us the time it takes to load, right? So you can see very clearly if it's slow, the average, how many times it's actually functioning. So for example, if it's calling the database 100 times just to get one product, you know there's a problem, right? And then how much memory is it using? And I have the definitions here. Okay, let's go right here. Okay, how many memory is consumed by PHP? And then how much RAM is actually used, how much memory is actually used on the system. So if you see something, let me go back here. If you see something is too slow or is using too much memory, something like that, you need to be alarmed that maybe our code is not the most efficient. And most likely it's using too much server and it's affecting the speed. Okay, so for example, we discovered before we made something custom that we need to optimize. We have a list, that's it. You can optimize your code. Okay, most calls should be very, very small, 0.00 something seconds. Very, very less than like 1% of the time. Most calls will be very, very little. Okay, so all of this together, all of these together should be our hope, and our goal is a 0.2 seconds maximum. 0.2 seconds, 0.2. Okay, so if you go here, there's a link in this document we're going to share. It just shows you what is a Magento profiler, how to turn it on, right? Very simple. Okay, it's really simple. You can just, here it is. That's it. That's all you have to do in order to enable it. But of course, read the document, understand what it does. And then you'll be able to see what is actually going on. What is it loading? And the first thing you should always do is look at the code that says with the folder called Astral Web, because that's something that we customize, right? Try to look less at the Magento, but pay attention to Magento default, but look at the things that we actually built. Or maybe if we use some extension, look at that. How do we optimize that? Okay. So any questions so far? No? Okay. Sunny, any questions? No? Okay. So next one we use, and this we use more rare, is we use a third-party app which costs monthly fees called New Relic. What they do is they provide many features. One of the features that is the most useful is their APM. What that means, it's kind of like the Magento profiler, but it gives us a lot more data. It also gives us how the CPU is used and how the memory is used, and it'll show us a breakdown of every single database call and every single page. So everything that the Magento profiler does, it can do a lot more depth, a lot more detail. And then if we have certain projects that need this, we can try it. And then we've used it for multiple cases, and it shows us a lot of cool information. Okay, so it goes deeper, but has an additional cost, so it depends on the project. But we use this plenty of times before. Okay, so any question, Michael?
So it's not free.
It's not a free one, no. So it depends on the server, the amount of servers you use. It has some cost, usually starting from about $100 a month and then going up from there. It's really useful. Big projects have to use this. Before we launch, we have to test, use it, and then do it. And there's other companies like Datadog and others, but this is the one that in particular I'm most familiar, but you guys can use different ones if you need. It's okay. Okay. The other thing to do is, aside from the Magento profiler, and this is just an example, you can also put your own code to monitor your own website, right? You can just take snippets, take sections, and just monitor. Are they good? Like what's fast, what's slow? You can add your own code to monitor whatever you want, right? This is just an example. Okay. Okay. So next, what else do we have? Okay. This is a very simple one. So if you want to monitor what database calls are slow, MySQL has a very simple thing. You can add slow queries and you can set a time. For example, I want to know every single query to the database that takes more than 0.1 seconds. And then you'll get a list. You can dump it in a log file and you can see what's slow. You guys, most of you guys know this, right? You can check out the slow queries. Okay? You can see what you're doing, what's wrong about it. Okay? Any questions? Okay. So what else can we do? CDN, right? So CDN are additional servers around the world that are closer to the visitor, right? So when we have a server, almost always we have the server in one location. So for example, our server is in Singapore, okay, just for example. Now, the visitors to website come from many different places. They come from Taiwan and US and whatever. So it takes them whenever, if you remember here, whenever I request the website, I'm located here in Nehu in Taipei, and I'm requesting from the server, which is in Singapore. I need to fetch the information all the way to Singapore. That takes time. Okay, that takes time to get data between one section to the other. So the further the server is, the more time it's going to take. Now, because everything's digital and we have good technology around the world, that time is very quick. But the latency, we call the latency, the time it takes, you want to minimize that. There's no reason you want to be far from your customers. So CDN will have servers around the world, which will just be faster, and they'll figure out, just like here, this is, for example, Cloudflare servers. So they'll just find the server that's closest to the person that's asking, and they'll deliver it. So there'll be minimal latency, as little space as possible. So aside from just other servers serving the information for you, so our server works less, they're also closer to the customer. Okay, this should make sense for you guys.
Yes.
Okay, very simple. Just it's a recap of these things. Okay, so next part. And now CDNs, there's many. There's Cloudflare, CloudFront, Akamai. There's a lot of different companies. Usually these are the two that we use the most. Next. Okay, so what do we do? What is the process? What are we thinking about when we want to test and optimize our code? This is the simple flow we follow. It's always going to be looking like this. First of all, we test. We use the tools, Magento Profiler. We use our own code. We use GT metrics. We use all these things, right? We test and we figure out what is not fast, what is not good. After we do that, we have to optimize. We optimize the code. We optimize the server. We optimize the CDN, all that stuff. Okay, sorry, CDN will be added. So we optimize the code first, then the settings, then the CDN. Why do we do it in this flow? A lot of times we want to just add a CDN and we think everything's going to be faster. But the CDN should be the last thing we optimize. Why? Because the code will affect the HTML. And HTML always loads before all of the images and JavaScript and everything. So first optimize the code, because that's the thing that loads before everything. Then you optimize the server settings, for example, MySQL, configuration, things like that, and then you add the CDN. Don't add the CDN to the beginning when you develop, because you're not gonna optimize it as best, as good. Okay. So now we're gonna actually talk about what can we do. Okay, so we got to how do we monitor, what's going on, why do we need, what tools can we use? Now we're actually going to talk about what are we doing. So we made a checklist. Every project, ISPO, for example, is going to use this document to actually, before you launch, you're going to check, say, oh, I finished this. This is good. I tested this. I did this. It's a checklist. Okay, so you guys can use it. In future, if we have more things, you can optimize it. Okay, here's a checklist. Improve server response time. The initial HTML, when a browser asks for a certain page, like give me the About Us page, then the server will do its job, check its PHP, check its code, go to the database, get all the information, give it back. That initial response, the initial, hey, give me the first thing, here you go, we call it TTFB, time to first byte. How long does it take to get the first information and then I throw it back to you? Improving that is always the first thing you have to do, not the CDN, whatever. The code you improve will always make this faster. Part of it will be server, small part. The biggest part will be the code you run, okay? Using using the Magento, the latest versions of Magento, reducing elements on page. So if there's 100 pictures on the page, if I make 80 pictures, it'll load faster, right? Can I use SVG? Can I use other code? Do I have to have all these elements? And we'll talk about things like lazy load after, okay? Removing unneeded modules in code. I want to show you an example. So Magento is very heavy by default. There's a lot of things it loads. For example, there's a module called wishlist. If your project doesn't have wishlist, there's no need to load that when the page loads. You don't need it, right? Yes. At all. Like there's no reason to load it. So let's give you an example, okay? So you can both disable modules on the command line in Magento, but you can also add to the design configuration either here or in the backend. You can also do something, for example, you see checkout cart, when I'm on the cart page, I can add this, hey, remove the shipping calculations. For example, is a good example. If the shopping cart doesn't need that block, which says calculate shipping, you just put that in, you save it, and that's it. It doesn't load that. Or this is for Magento 2. This is one example, right? But there's many of these. Let's stop loading things we don't need. Okay? And this is just an example. If this is need to change or whatever, it's okay. The other way, you can just disable a module. The problem, one thing to note, a lot of modules are connected to each other. They're dependent on each other. They have dependencies. So if you remove something, but you're not familiar with the other stuff, you could break Magento. So you got to be careful, right? But there's no reason to load things you don't need. You don't have wish list? Why do you need to load the wish list? Why do you need the server every page to work extra, slow down the speed, and just use extra resources? There's no reason to do that, right? Okay. So we can remove things on pages, less images, less information. We can also remove unneeded modules in code.
Or just uninstall.
We can uninstall. There's a lot of ways, but basically have the server not use them. That's the most important part. Uninstall also. Okay, what else can we do? Okay, so install using the latest so software always gets better, right? Like the cars today are better than the cars before, right? The PHP versions, the MySQL versions, they're better. I want to show you an example so you understand that simple concept. What is actually getting better from speed? But speed is also means use less server, use less RAM, use less CPU, all that stuff. Yeah, so this is all on the left-hand side are all the PHP versions. Before, we even have some clients, we still use 5.6, some old clients. Yeah. So there's a test, there's a test, there's a lot of benchmark tests that are done. So in order to actually load certain code, in 5.6 with the same server, everything's exactly same server, same software, same everything, you could load about 100 times PHP code, run it in 1 second. And then 7.0 was the really big jump. You can load for the same server, same everything, 250. And eventually 7.4 can go up to 312. That's a big difference. By just having the latest software, the website is faster, uses less system resources. Okay, you guys kind of know this, but sometimes when you see this, you can see it's a huge up. It's really big difference. Okay, now one thing to be very careful about 7.4, because Magento just started supporting 7.4, some of the modules and extensions, if we buy, they might not support. So if you have the latest because you want to be faster, you might break other things. So you got to be careful. Like, try to use the latest version, but be very, like, pay attention to what it does. because new versions, they deprecate, they have less some code they don't support, or they change the way functions work or things like that. So you got to be careful with that, okay? Next one is, and the same thing applies, right, for MySQL versions and every other thing, right? PHP, FPM, all these other things. Next one is we need to use, this is a lot on server level, right? But we need to start using correct things. Magento recommends, and I think every PHP project should have this, recommends opcache. Okay, we talked about this a lot. So opcache and is a way to basically store all the code in its memory to run it, and then when you need to load it, it'll run much faster. Because whenever you load a page, PHP has to go get all the code, run the index.php, get all the stuff, all these other files, and then it has to load it and run it. That takes time for a server. It takes a lot of time, actually. I want to show you what happens when you turn on opcache. So I want everybody in all projects to use opcache, no matter what, but also understand, and maybe you can later explain more, how to use it, because you need to refresh because it's putting things in cache. If you want to change your code, right? You had that. You want to change the code, you can't.
We had an issue with that.
So we got to talk about it.
It's better. I think OPCache is better to use it on production.
Yes, yes.
Development.
Yeah, so OPCache is it's saving your code in cache. So you only want to use it in production. But I want to show you, here's an example. When OPCache or OpCache is turned off, we did an experiment with Magento 2.4, right? Which one was it? 2.4. And so the home page, it took, just for the HTML part, just for the first part, on the sample data on a very basic Magento, it took 0.8 seconds to get the request and provide the HTML. When we turned it on, it was 53% faster. We didn't do any code optimization, anything. We just turned it on. Here's the settings. Turned it on. It's 50% faster just with opcache on. That means you don't optimize the code. You don't change anything. You just turn it on.
Yes.
The server will remember, put in memory all of its code, storing pre-compiled script bytecode. I'm not sure fully what that means, but basically the way it runs the PHP. And that's it. And it runs 50% faster than HTML. If you turn it on, I'm not sure if Decathlon has it, for example, or others, then you'll basically, it's fast. It goes much faster. But we always want to optimize our code with this turned off. Because first we make our code better, then we turn it on, right? So this is why we have a flow. Test, optimize the code, change the server settings, add CDN, right? There's a flow for it. So you don't think it's fast, but you can just make it better, okay? And fast also means server. It uses more server, more memory, more everything, okay? Let's use this. Really important. Opcache has to be used on all production servers. Okay. Aside from that, things you guys always know on the server setting, gzip, caching. So whenever an asset is provided, like an image or a JavaScript, the server and the code tells how long for the browser, how long do you store it? When do you request a new image? Okay. So every project will be different, but we need to set certain caching. Every project, every PM will have to decide how long do you save it for. On Astral website, just for example, on this site, this is a content. So we don't change the banners often. We don't change this. We do a caching policy for 1 month. If someone downloads this in the browser, it's going to last for 1 month unless we reset it, right? But every project is different. Maybe 1 day, 1 hour, 1 month. But every project needs to cache things for longer. Okay? You just save resources, make it faster. Okay, next thing, which is super important. This happens a lot. So Magento uses full page caching, okay, FPC. What does that mean? When a page loads the first time, Magento will store locally a copy of that information and load the page very fast. Okay, so you guys know full page caching, right?
Yes.
Pretty simple. Now, usually in production always, but also in dev, usually we just have it turned on. We have it turned on and we think it's good. But full page caching doesn't actually work unless all of your blocks are set to cacheable. Okay? So I've seen a lot of our projects have it turned on, and then the page, the HTML loads it, for example, at 0.8 seconds, right? Happens a lot. And then we're like, hey, how come like it doesn't work? Okay, so let's take this. By the way, Queenie, we need to edit some stuff when we publish, like remove logos and stuff like that. So we'll have to do some small thing. Okay, so let's look at an example. What I do is I'm going to go to network. I'm going to load the page. I want to show you how you know if full page cache is actually working for that page. How do you know that? Aside from just going to the back end, you need to know that it's actually caching. So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go to the first HTML right here. Okay, so here it took, if you notice, this page took almost 0.8 seconds to load. Most likely, if you see something that is more than 0.4, it's most likely not full page cache turned on, or at least not using the full page cache. And I would say even more than 0.3 is probably not using it. So how do you know that? Okay, so I don't want to get too much detail into it, but when you ask for every single element, you ask HTML, JavaScript, images, the server communicates and says, I want this, here's what I want, and then the browser says, here's what I want, and here's how I want it, and the server says, okay, here you go, and it adds headers, it adds additional information to the data. Okay, so we can get into that in a different time, but it does it. So if you notice here, there's a section here called Magento cache control. Means how long do I save this in memory? For example, 86,400 is 1 day in seconds. And there's here X cache Magento debug miss. That means the full page cache was not used. Okay, why was it not used? Because, let's go here. Because at least, so one or more of the blocks were set to cacheable equals false. You need to make sure, and sometimes a page should, like a shopping cart, should not be fully cacheable, right?
Yes.
Because shopping cart has products that are changing. But homepage should for sure have, in this case, should always have. So you need to go through your code, and there's different tools that can help you analyze that better. And you got to make sure it's on. And once you do that, it's going to go fast. It'll be 0.2 seconds. And then you turn op cache on, and then you do server settings, and the website flies. Okay? So these things, so op cache, super important, cacheable when you need. So every PM, every technical lead need to decide when do we cache, when do we not. We're going to have checklists to say, this is what we do for the project. This is what needs to be fast. This is how it is. This is how we cache it. These are the policies. These things. These are super, super important. Okay? For example, this is the code. This is the code in this block, cacheable false. You know this better than me. I'm not too familiar with this, but at least the concept, we know this. Cacheable equals true when you need it. Sometimes not. Okay? Now, sometimes you want to make a website load very fast, but you have to have something non-cacheable, right? So for example, false, but you don't want the whole page to be affected. So there's many ways to do it, but the simpler way is to do it. You load the whole page without this block, and that block loads via JavaScript. The page loads, and immediately the other part loads. So the first HTML is super fast, and the rest just loads on demand.
Yes.
Okay? There's a lot of ways to do it. You can use Varnish, which is a software we can talk a little bit later, which basically caches everything but puts holes. Say, I'm going to cache all of this, but this part I'm not going to cache it. And that part will load very fast, and then the rest will just load a little slower. There's a lot of ways to do it. JavaScript is the easiest one to do, but there's a lot of other ways to do it. Okay, lazy load. We're almost finished. It's not like going to be too long. Okay, so lazy load. When the page loads, the browser sees the first part. This is the on-screen part, right? But everything that loads below doesn't necessarily need to load immediately. If I scroll down, it can load. So I can load images, videos, content a little bit later. When you need to do that. There's no reason to have the server and the browser load slower if you don't need that element. So there's two ways of doing a lazy load. One is what we always do is we load some JavaScript library, and then we lazy load. We decide this image and this image loads later. But what you can also do, and this we need to do by default always, is we can do a Chrome lazy load. So Chrome, from a few versions back, allows just for Chrome browsers just to put in one tag in the HTML of the images and the videos, and it'll automatically lazy load without putting a whole JavaScript library inside. And most of our sites have between 50 and 60% of our visitors are using Chrome anyways. So you can just use it. So putting a simple tag, let me show you how simple it is. Here it is. This is a simple, here, look at this. This is a simple image, source, whatever. It's a simple HTML tag, right? If you add loading equals lazy without any JavaScript, nothing, you just add that. If it's not at the top, if it's not visible, if it's actually scrolling down, it'll lazy load. And Chrome browser will do that for you. So even if we don't have lazy load and we don't want to put JavaScript, whatever, let's start adding this tag. It's really simple. It's going to save a lot of bandwidth, a lot of server power for sure speed. Loading equals lazy. That's it. Simple. You can do the same thing with iframes. Okay, images and iframes. Just add it. There's no reason not to add that. But you need to make sure that you add it in the right places. Sometimes you don't want a lazy load. Maybe only at the bottom of the page you want a lazy load. Maybe in the middle you do or you don't. So that depends on the PM and the project itself. It's pretty nice. Use it. It was released like a year ago, or I'm not sure exactly how, maybe 8 months ago. Just use it. Make the website faster. Okay? Loading equals lazy. Very simple. Everything in the document here you can read. There's links, there's information. You can ask me, and you can improve it. If I miss something, you guys know a lot of things really well. Let's add it. Let's make it good, publish for everybody, and use it internally. Okay, almost finished. A few more things. Next one. Enable HTTP2. This is a server thing, right? I think we pretty much do it by default, but just in case, the way I get the information, okay? The way I can get the information is I ask for the HTML from the browser, from the server. Server replies, I do, give me this, give me that, give me that. It goes back and forth, back. Takes a long time, okay? But once you use new software, right, new technologies, the same information can go much faster. And actually, HTTP2 does a lot faster, a lot of different. So this is just a software setting that makes things faster on just the communication part. I have to basically, I have to wait less and I can ask more very quickly. Okay. And next part. Images are a very big part. Images are a very big part. Images take the most file size out of a page. So if we can make those images smaller, better. What do? One is we educate our customers to know what's the file size they need to use. What's the maximum file size of a product image? For example, 200K, 0.2 megabytes. What's the maximum size of a banner image on the homepage? What are the dimensions of the maximum I need to? So we need to educate them. Dimensions, how high and how wide. What's the file size? And then we give them some software to compress their images. Say, before you upload, throw it through the software, make it smaller. Okay, you can compress. You can either lossless compress, which is make the file a little smaller, keep the same quality, or you can lossy, which is reduce the quality a little bit, but make it a lot smaller. So this is a good compressor.io has a good web version. You can just give to our clients in our education documents. Here you go. ImageOptim is a good Mac software. It's really good. For my opinion, it's the best software that exists to compress images. It works really well. Okay, and educate the clients how to upload these things. Okay. Last part of the images is when we develop, we can tell Magento what are the sizes of the images that we receive. We tell them, okay? So let's look at this example. So number one, there's settings in the backend. When Magento resizes things, for example, you upload a product image and then you say, I want to resize it to thumbnail and small image. Those, when you select a product, we can select in the store configuration, what's the quality size? And what's the maximum width and the maximum height? So even if the customer uploads a big one, it just says, hey, sorry, you can't upload that. We don't allow them to upload very heavy images. This is one. The next one is for the front-end developer. When you make your code, you can specify also the size of the images, right? So for example, here, this is my thumbnail image. I only want it to be 80 by 80. I don't want it to be 200 pixels by 200 pixels. You have to specify in the code what is the standard. The PM needs to help understand that and then clarify that. And then we do it. So resizing, code, validation, we need to make sure we're using the correct sizes always. Last part, this is just some extra stuff. We're basically finished. Don't forget to check actions. Page loads is very important, but actions. Sometimes like you log in and it takes a long time because of the SSO of the customer. Could happen. But we need to check actions too. Searching, logging in, register, forgot password. How long does it take to run cron, right? These backend things, these are very important. Second one is Google Analytics speed. We can also, once we launch a site, we can go to behavior, site speed, and overall, and we can look how fast is our website. I looked, for example, in the last 20 days, this is our site. Our site loaded in 3.73 seconds. This is our site. This is pretty good. This is a good speed, okay? This is not very fast, but this is very high, good speed. And then if I go here to page timings, I can see for every page how long did it take. So you can see, okay, this one took whatever. So for example, I have this page. This is just an article I clicked on. And this page loaded, this is one of our articles, loaded in 3.7 seconds. And here's over time how it might have been slower or faster. So I can also use Google Analytics to do that. Small note about Google Analytics, when you plug it in, Google Analytics will automatically check the speed. But they only report 1% of all the traffic. So if I have 1,000 visitors, it's just 1% of it. But if we add a small code in the tracking code, we can tell it to do 100% and monitor everything, which is what we did for Astral Web. Just one extra line in the tracking code. It said site speed, whatever, 100. That's it. It's called sample site speed, I believe. Okay. Okay. What else do we have? MySQL tuning, right? There's a lot of things. There's a lot of settings that could be very helpful to save things in memory, to give more cache size, things like that. Latest PHP version, super important. PHP really improved a lot. Don't forget Google SEO, right? Speed is a factor. Google announced, hey, speed is part of our ranking system. Web Vitals is very important. I'll do some future articles about it. And test location, right? So just like we use a CDN, make sure you have your server as close as possible to most of your customers. And then we can use other tools in future like Selenium, which is a visual browser. It can basically be just like Chrome and test everything. You can test how things look. You can use automated tests like Ghost Inspector. Varnish is sitting in front of the server to cache your pages, cache your HTML. This is very important, which we'll get into in future. But Varnish is very advanced. I think we're going to maybe use it for our project. No. So we can figure out the speed before we just like see if we actually need to add it. But with all this stuff, we probably don't need it either.
I think the Varnish is the CDN, so we can choose one. No need the Varnish.
But Varnish is for HTML. CDN is for everything else.
Yes, but if you with CDN and the Varnish, you have too many cache, and then you upload a new code, you need to refresh.
Sure. And we can make, either we can, sometimes it is overkill for sure. Sometimes we don't need to do it, but we can do it. Last one is MySQL indexes, right? If we're making code that's always pulling information, getting the same information from the database, we can see sometimes we make indexes, it really improves the speed. Okay, so any questions about this? That's the end of this topic. Any questions? No? Okay, so we're going to send it. We're going to make this in Chinese. We're going to post all the documents and all the links on our blog. We're going to share it to everybody. And then we want you guys to actually review it and over time add to it. This is good. This is not good. Let's make websites fast. And every project that we launch before that, I want to test it with you guys. I want to review with you guys so we can test well, we can report well, and we can have very fast websites. Okay, so every project. That's it. Thank you guys. Thank you guys.